I'm Michael Pollack, Managing Director of Spectrum Gaming Group and Executive Director of the National Council of Legislators from Gaming States. I have the privilege of interviewing Sandra Douglas Morgan, Chair of the Nevada Gaming Control Board, an agency that's a global leader in effective regulation. Sandra, as a former regulator myself, I believe it's safe to say that there is not a gaming regulator anywhere in the world who expected that dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic would be a top issue in 2020. Yet here we are, playing the serious hand we're dealt. With that in mind, looking at the rest of 2020 and beyond, what are the regulatory priorities in Nevada when it comes to gaming? And what role, if any, does the Nevada Gaming Control Board have in ensuring that gaming operators adhere to COVID-19 guidelines?
With respect to the Nevada Gaming Control Board and the Commission, our legislature has enacted public policy mandates to ensure that we foster not only the stability and success of the gaming industry, in addition to protecting the public health and the safety of all Nevada residents and our guests. And so I think it's incredibly important for us as regulators to inform our licensees of the expectation of the new operational requirements that will be imposed to mitigate and reduce the exposure of COVID, not only for all employees, and most importantly, but for our patrons and our other guests as well. We are committed, the entire Gaming Control Board is committed to work with our local health officials and our local health districts in ensuring that gaming operations in the state do not compromise the health and safety of Nevadans. We will ensure that not only our enforcement mechanisms, but all of our agents are there on property. We have tremendous licensees. All of the conversations that I've had thus far have been incredibly positive. They understand the importance of reopening and getting it right, and knowing that in order for Nevada to continue to lead, to be the hospitality capital of the world, it includes ensuring that guests feel safe. And so, of course, deep cleaning and repetitive cleaning and employee training is incredibly important. And as a regulator, we want to not only make it very clear what our expectations of them are, but ensure that we have the ability to confirm that they're complying with them as well.
Sandra, how can regulators and legislators help support the industry's efforts to reopen and recover from the current crisis? Are there any rules that need to be relaxed to help the industry recover?
Well, I think we're going to obviously have a new set of guidelines and rules with regard to health and sanitation that probably isn't normally traditionally in a gaming regulator's role. But again, to ensure that the safety and the comfort of the guest and the employees, we need to make sure that's imperative. So with regard to, in that respect, probably not relaxing. However, our gaming licensees have been closed now for about 6 weeks at the time of this taping. And so we know that is obviously a huge economic hit that a lot of our gaming companies have taken and are currently taken. And so we have at least attempted to share guidance with them with regard to certain things that we would be willing to waive. For example, most gaming employees, if not all gaming employees, have to be registered with the Gaming Control Board. If we have expirations or there are notices that are temporary, we will definitely extend those until at least 30 days after the reopening is allowed pursuant to the governor's directive. Additionally, we've informed our gaming licensees that if they offer only slot machines in their establishments, that they could simply file and pay taxes just for one slot machine during the closure. Additionally, if they offer machines and table games, they can file and pay for just one of each game and one of each slot machine. We're also giving them the ability, licensees, the ability upon reopening to amend their tax forms to reflect the proper number of machines or games that they plan to resume upon reopening. So those are some things that we can do from a regulatory perspective. In Nevada, our legislature meets every other year, so there may be some other legislative relief that gaming licensees will seek, but we're definitely in consistent communication with them and seeing what we can do to kind of assist them through this difficult time as well.
Thank you, Sandra. Now, Nevada recently cleared and approved wagering on a number of esports events. Can you tell us about the decision to allow esports betting, how you're approaching the regulation of bet types, whether you think esports will have a long-term place in the betting industry? Related to that, are you concerned esports lack a recognized governing body or that esports may be prone to match fixing?
It was about a little less than 4 years ago where the Nevada Gaming Policy Committee actually evaluated and discussed esports and studied whether or not esports or wagering on esports should be allowed. And so we're, talking less than, 4 years ago. And this was a policy committee that was created at the request of the then governor, Brian Sandoval, in conjunction with the chairs of my predecessor and chairs of the Gaming Commission, and also had representatives from the Nevada Assembly and Senate, in addition to representatives from the gaming industry as well. And they discussed, obviously, whether or not esports should be classified as a traditional sport, such as football, baseball, or soccer, or whether or not it should be classified as an other event. And eventually, the committee actually opined that it should be characterized as another event. And the Gaming Control Board and Commission ultimately adopted rules in our Regulation 22 that created not only that classification, but also included some criteria as to whether or not wagering could be allowed on those types of events. The requests for wagers in Nevada on esports event are strictly based on licensee demand. The licensee is actually the one that initiates the process. So it's the race and sports book that would contact the control board and say, we have this event, these are the parameters, and this is what we are asking for permission to request and accept wagers on. And so it was also noted during the discussions about whether to allow wagering on esports that sports books are actually going to be that first line of defense, and they always have been in Nevada when it comes to preventing actual match fixing and then notifying the board, as they often do when they believe that there may be issues. So esports does have some of the same problems that traditional sports has. And when I say traditional sports, obviously I'm referencing, football, basketball, baseball, and soccer. Match fixing is probably more prevalent in esports than traditional sports because you have an issue of not only the lack of a sanctioning body, but also salaries are low. The fact that there is a lack of a powerful governing body in esports to actually enforce rules and penalties and know that there are strict guidelines that then we can rely on have been an issue. And but having necessarily a strong governing body isn't necessarily a guarantee that there will be no issues on any type of sports wagering. The future of esports in Nevada, I think, again, will be based on demand. We have obviously in the last 4 to 6 weeks improved more requests for esports wagering, just because there have not been a lot of sports. So there have been more books that have contacted the board to ask for approval of those. So our enforcement division obviously looks at the criteria and speaks to the book and ultimately makes the decision as to whether or not to allow wagering. Additionally, I think it's important to note that the Gaming Control Board a few years ago actually entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Esports Integrity Commission to allow us to not only share information, but to have a consistent line of communication to better evaluate esports contests and have specific metrics to measure the integrity of the organizations involved in esports. And so ESIC, for short, has partnered with many large tournament organizers and have also held training with them. And I anticipate that relationship will continue to grow, not just with the tournament organizers and ESIC, but also with between them and the Gaming Control Board as well.
I have the privilege of interviewing Representative Brant Iden, not only a representative in Michigan, but an officer in the National Council of Legislators in Gaming States, who has become one of the nation's leading legislators when it comes to gaming policy. And I should add that Michigan is a leader among gaming states. Brant, what are the regulatory priorities in Michigan when it comes to gaming, looking ahead at the rest of 2020 and beyond?
Very exciting for the state of Michigan, actually. We're looking to implement and fast track iGaming as well as mobile sports betting. So obviously that legislation was passed at the end of last year. My legislation was passed, and we're getting it up and fast tracking it so we could potentially be up and ready by this fall, so people could both play with their with the iGaming platform as well as the mobile sports betting as soon as maybe August or September.
Brant, how can regulators and legislators support the gaming industry's efforts to reopen and recover from the current crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think that what legislators need to focus on, and this is going to be a big issue, each state is going to be looking to capitalize on revenue. Just like Michigan, we are looking to, with COVID and in the middle of the pandemic, we're going to need dollars. We're going to need dollars to our state budget. With our land-based casinos being closed, I believe that the next platform is going to be online. I believe that's where players are going to go. And if states don't have a regulatory system in place, they could go to the black market. And that's dangerous for everyone. When you have gamers playing on the black market, not only are you not collecting that state revenue, but at the same time, those people are being open to unscrupulous actors where their personal information could be taken advantage of. They could perhaps be winning and not being paid. A very dangerous situation when people go to the black market. So I think that the key is to get states up and running, get online gaming going as well as sports betting where we know players are, and get them off the black market and collect those state revenues.
Grant, I should point out that when it comes to iLottery, Michigan was a pioneer and has developed a very successful iLottery program. How do you see iGaming evolving in Michigan? Will it conflict or will it converge with Michigan's very successful iLottery program?
That's a very interesting question and one that was debated. I worked on this legislation for the past 5 years before it was finally signed into law at December of 2019. I will tell you that I don't think so. I think that there are folks out there that will say that dollars will be pulled from one revenue source to another. But actually, I believe that a rising tide lifts all ships. Really, at the end of the day, what this is about is providing players different opportunities. And I think that people that play iLottery will also utilize iGaming or mobile sports betting. But at the same time, we recognize that there are different players. So I think people will either play on all platforms or they will play on platforms that they're most familiar with. If I'm a blackjack player, I like to play blackjack. If I'm a sports bettor, I bet sports. I don't necessarily always participate in iLottery. So, in fact, I think that this is going to grow the revenue for the state of Michigan.
I have the privilege and the pleasure of interviewing my friend Chris Hebert, Gaming Division Director in the Louisiana Attorney General's office. And I add that Chris is very much a national leader among his peers in establishing effective gaming policy and practices. Chris, what are the regulatory priorities in Louisiana when it comes to gaming, looking ahead at the rest of 2020 and beyond? Noting that the Spectrum Gaming Group study that I participated in Louisiana recommended examining the tax rate as well as allowing riverboats to relocate, among other recommendations. Are these recommendations under consideration?
Well, with regard to regulatory priorities in Louisiana when it comes to gaming, looking ahead past 2020, after our statewide closures due to COVID-19 and the fact that our casinos are still closed today, the main priority and focus will be ensuring a calculated reopening of our casinos while implementing protocols and assurances to protect our citizens from exposure or illness. Just as in other Louisiana jurisdictions, our casinos in our state have lost millions due to the pandemic and closures. And as gaming is a top income producer in Louisiana, even topping our oil and gas industry here, the lost revenue is catastrophic to our economy. With regard to the Spectrum Gaming Group study, while it would greatly benefit our casinos and our operators in other forms of gaming, I'm just not sure that our legislature will move forward with a reduction of tax rate at this particular time. Also, our legislature reconvened today, and there are no bills currently offered to reduce a tax rate. And I do believe that part of that is due to the fact that we are in a non-fiscal legislative session, which means they're prohibited from doing so unless there is a special session called. Whether or not a casino or riverboat is allowed to relocate, I think there will be legislation that we see come up in next year's legislative session as the time for filing those bills have passed for this session. There was a bill filed last year which failed, but I do think depending on how our riverboats respond after the crisis, there will be new things to consider with regard to a relocation.
Chris, Louisiana just missed out on implementing sports betting legislation in 2019. So what do you think we can expect to see Louisiana residents betting on whether it's the Saints, the Pelicans, or any other team. What might that regulation look like? Or will Louisiana elect to not allow betting on local college or professional teams?
Well, there are several bills this session that have been filed regarding sports betting. And if any of them are passed, there will be a local option election in every parish, which are akin to counties here in every other state in the United States. But there will be a local option election in every parish to see if that parish will offer sports betting. And if so, then next summer, the legislature will have to pass legislation pertaining to licensing and taxation, given that our next fiscal session will be next year. So we could potentially see sports betting in Louisiana as soon as July 2021. I can't say what the legislatures will or will not pass, but none of the bills that I recall in the last 3 years have actually restricted betting here on our local teams or eliminated college betting. So we could see betting on both the Saints, Pelicans, as well as our LSU Tigers here. It will be interesting to see if the need for increased state revenue in the aftermath of COVID-19 has any effect on those legislators who were against sports betting last year, and whether or not they might reconsider their positions for this session.
Well, thank you to this esteemed group of officials, Sandra, Chris, and Brant. This was very helpful with some excellent insights put forward that I hope your colleagues and the rest of the gaming industry around the country pay heed to. And I want to thank everyone for participating.